The old courthouse loomed imposing on that chilly Monday morning. Its marble steps, worn down from years of use, led to a moment that would shake the heart of the city. Sarah Thompson, a 35-year-old black mother of 3, ascended those steps with her court-appointed lawyer by her side. Her hands quivered, yet her head remained high. Inside courtroom 7B, the air was heavy, and Sarah sat upright in her chair, dressed in her best navy blue dress, one she usually reserved for Sunday church. Her tired eyes reflected the toll of 3 long months in county jail, awaiting this very day. A small bottle of unlabeled prescription pills found in her car had brought her here. Despite explaining they were her elderly mother's, the charges stuck. At precisely 9 a.m., Judge William Harrison entered the courtroom. The room stood in unison as he made his way to the bench, his black robe trailing behind him like a dark shadow. At 63, Judge Harrison had been on the bench for 15 years, earning a reputation for his unwavering strictness. What wasn't often spoken of, but widely known, were his disproportionately harsh sentences for minorities. The prosecutor, young David Reynolds, presented a case that seemed routine: simple possession, no intent to distribute. Normally, cases like these ended in probation, or at worst, a few months in jail. But Reynolds seemed uneasy, his voice lacking the usual conviction, a stark contrast to the seriousness of the charges. Sarah's public defender, Mark Wilson, did what he could with limited resources. He spoke of Sarah's unblemished record, her volunteer work at the food bank, and her role as the primary caregiver for her 3 children, Michael 14, Lisa 11, and James 8. He explained how Sarah worked 2 jobs, mornings at the local diner and evenings as a cleaning supervisor at the city hospital. "Your Honor," Wilson's voice echoed in the silence of the courtroom, "Mrs. Thompson is a pillar of the community. The pills in question were her mother's heart medication. Though she should have kept them in their original containers, this was a simple mistake, not one that warrants severe punishment." Judge Harrison's face remained impassive throughout the defense's plea, his cold blue eyes never betraying any emotion. The few spectators in the room, mostly law students and others awaiting their own cases, sensed something was amiss. When Sarah was given the floor to speak, she stood with quiet dignity. "Your Honor, I know I made a mistake," she said, her voice steady, "but my children need me. My mother needs me. I've learned my lesson, and I promise you'll never see me in this courtroom again." The judge's response began with a prolonged silence. He shuffled papers, removed his glasses, and cleaned them slowly with a white handkerchief. Finally, his voice broke the quiet, carrying an icy tone. "Mrs. Thompson," he began, emphasizing each word, "this court has heard too many excuses, too many promises of reform. The law must be upheld, and examples must be made." He paused, replacing his glasses, then delivered his verdict. "Considering the evidence presented and your apparent disregard for the law, I hereby sentence you to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 25 years. Gasps filled the courtroom, and Sarah's lawyer leaped to his feet. "Your Honor, this is highly irregular. The sentencing guidelines for this offense up." Silence. Judge Harrison's gavel struck down with authority. "One more word, Mr. Wilson, and you'll be held in contempt." The bailiff moved to remove the prisoner, and Sarah stood frozen, her mind unable to comprehend what had just transpired. As the cold metal handcuffs clicked around her wrists, she broke down, quiet sobs filling the room. Even the prosecutor seemed taken aback, nervously shifting his papers and avoiding eye contact. Law students frantically scribbled notes, knowing they were witnessing an injustice unfold. As Sarah was led away, her final words reverberated through the courtroom. "Please, someone call my children's school. They're waiting for me to pick them up today." Judge Harrison left the bench without a word, his robe trailing behind him as he disappeared into his chambers, oblivious to the tears streaming down Sarah's face or the discomfort on the bailiff's expression. Outside, dark clouds began to gather, as if nature itself was reacting to the grave injustice that had just occurred. None of the people leaving the courthouse that morning realized the impact this verdict would have, setting off a chain of events that would shake their city to its core. Meanwhile, Mayor James Mitchell sat in his office, reviewing proposals for the new community center, when his secretary's voice interrupted his thoughts. "Mr. Mayor, you need to see this. Channel 7 News is running a breaking story about the sentencing at the courthouse." James turned on the TV and his heart sank when he saw Sarah's face on the screen, the news ticker reading, "Local mother sentenced to life for minor drug offense." His hands began to tremble as the shock hit him. Sarah Thompson wasn't just a name, she was his wife. For 12 years, their marriage had been a secret to protect their children and to shield Sarah from political scrutiny. They lived apart during the week, meeting only on weekends at their lake house to preserve a semblance of normalcy. But now, everything they had carefully protected was in jeopardy. "Cancel all my meetings," he ordered, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Get me District Attorney Rachel Chen on the phone, immediately." As he waited for the call, his mind raced. He hadn't even known about Sarah's arrest. She must have kept it from him to protect his career, just as they had agreed. His phone buzzed with a text from their son Michael. "Dad, something's happened to Mom. They're saying it's on the news. What's going on?" Before he could reply, Rachel's voice came through the phone. "James," she said, skipping pleasantries, "I just heard. This is completely irregular. Harrison has gone too far this time." "I need you to understand something," James replied, his voice tight. "Sarah Thompson, she's my wife." The silence on the other end lasted a moment. "Your what?" Rachel finally managed. "How is that possible? We've worked together for 3 years." "We kept it private," James explained, "to protect our family. But now, I can't stay silent. I can't let her serve 25 years for carrying her mother's heart medication in the wrong bottle." Rachel's legal mind clicked into action. This changes everything. Harrison has no idea he just sentenced the mayor's wife to life in prison. The press will have a field day, but more importantly, this could expose years of discriminatory practices. A knock on his door interrupted the call. James's chief of staff Tom Wilson entered with a stack of papers. "Sir, reporters are gathering in the lobby. Someone leaked that you canceled your meetings after the Thompson sentencing." James stood, now fully aware of the battle ahead. "Rachel, start reviewing Harrison's past cases. I want every instance of racial bias documented. Tom, call a press conference for 5 p.m. today. It's time the truth came out." As his team sprang into action, James gazed at a photo on his desk, a picture of Sarah, him, and their children from a happy day at the lake house. "I'll make this right," he whispered to the photo. "I promise." The sun streamed through the windows of City Hall, but storm clouds were gathering. In just hours, Mayor James Mitchell would step up to the podium and reveal a truth that would set off a series of events none of them could predict. Meanwhile, in her cell, Sarah had no idea that her husband was about to risk everything: his career, their privacy, and their carefully constructed life, to save her from a justice system that had failed her. In the last 5 years, every case Judge Harrison had presided over revealed a disturbing pattern. One after another, the numbers told a clear story. Minority defendants, especially Black and Hispanic individuals, were sentenced to prison terms 3 to 4 times longer than their white counterparts for similar crimes. The bias was so blatant that Rachel couldn't understand how no one had noticed it sooner. As she picked up her coffee cup, she realized it was empty for the 3rd time that night. Standing to refill it, her phone buzzed with a text from Mayor Mitchell. "Any progress?" Rachel quickly typed back, "Found 47 cases so far, all showing clear bias. Meeting tomorrow at 8 a.m. The response came immediately, "I'll be there." Just then, Tom rushed into her office, holding a thick folder. His usually neat tie was loosened, and his sleeves were rolled up after hours of digging through records. "Miss Chen, you need to see this," he said, placing the folder on her desk. Rachel opened it and began scanning the documents. Her eyes widened. Before becoming a judge, Harrison had represented several organizations known for discriminatory practices. He even wrote legal opinions supporting segregation in private schools. "There's more," Tom continued, pulling out several old newspaper clippings. "In 1985, he was part of a law firm that tried to block the construction of a black church in his neighborhood. The case was dismissed, but his name is all over the paperwork." Rachel leaned back in her chair, processing the new information. "This is bigger than we thought. It's not just Sarah Thompson's case anymore. This is about 15 years of systematic discrimination from the bench." She grabbed her phone and called Judge Martinez, head of the Judicial Review Board. "David, I'm sorry to call so late, but this can't wait. We've found evidence of long-term judicial misconduct by Judge Harrison. We need an emergency hearing." While Rachel spoke, Tom continued sorting through files, occasionally passing her sticky notes with important details. A spreadsheet displayed the growing list of cases where Harrison's sentences deviated drastically from state guidelines, always harsher for minorities. After hanging up, Rachel walked to her office window, the city lights twinkling below. Somewhere out there, Sarah Thompson was spending her first night in prison, separated from her children, all because of one judge's prejudice. A knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. Jessica Wong, a young clerk, entered, carrying another box of files. "Miss Chen, I found these in the basement archives. They're Judge Harrison's cases from his first year on the bench." Rachel nodded, grateful. "Put them with the others, Jessica, and thank you for staying late." As Jessica left, Rachel's phone buzzed again. It was a news alert. Mayor Mitchell to make an unprecedented personal statement tomorrow regarding Thompson case. Rachel knew James was taking a huge risk by publicly acknowledging his marriage to Sarah, but as she looked at the growing piles of evidence, she knew it was the right decision. This wasn't just about one case, it was about justice itself. Tom appeared at her door again. "Should we go home? It's almost midnight." Rachel shook her head, picking up another file. "Not yet. Sarah Thompson doesn't get to go home tonight, and neither do all the other people Harrison wrongly sentenced. The least we can do is keep working." Determined, she turned back to her desk, ready to build a case that would not only free Sarah, but expose 15 years of judicial corruption. Outside her window, the night grew deeper, but inside her office, the lights stayed on, illuminating the path toward justice. The next morning, the City Hall press room buzzed with energy. Reporters from every local station and major network were there, eager to learn why Mayor Mitchell had called an emergency press conference. None of them knew what was coming, but rumors swirled about its connection to the shocking Thompson sentencing. James stood behind the stage, adjusting his tie for the 10th time. His chief of staff, Tom Wilson, reviewed the prepared statement one last time. James' hands trembled slightly as he thought about Sarah, spending her second night in prison. "Are you absolutely sure about this?" Tom asked quietly. "Once you make this announcement, there's no going back. Your private life, your children's lives, everything will change." James looked down at the wedding ring he now wore openly on his finger, usually hidden during public appearances. "Sarah's worth it. The truth is worth it." At exactly 5 p.m., James Mitchell stepped up to the podium. Camera flashes lit up the room like lightning. He gripped the sides of the podium, looked directly into the main camera, and began speaking. "Good evening. Today, I stand before you not just as your mayor, but as a husband and father." He paused for a moment, his voice growing stronger. "Sarah Thompson, who was sentenced to life in prison yesterday by Judge William Harrison, is my wife." The room erupted in gasps. Reporters jumped to their feet, shouting questions, while camera flashes intensified. James raised his hand for silence. "For 12 years, we've kept our marriage private to protect our 3 beautiful children and allow Sarah to live a normal life, away from politics. But now, that privacy has been weaponized against her." He pulled out a family photo from his pocket and held it up. "This is our family. Sarah is not just case number 47800. She is my wife, the mother of our children. She is a person, and she deserves justice." The room fell silent. James continued, his voice rising with controlled anger. "Judge Harrison's sentence is not just an attack on my wife. It is a symptom of a deeper problem in our justice system, a problem of bias and discrimination that has gone unchecked for far too long." At the county jail, inmates and guards gathered around the TV in the common area. In her cell, Sarah sat on her bed, tears streaming down her face as she watched her husband risk everything for her. Back at City Hall, James revealed the preliminary findings of Rachel's investigation. An initial review shows that Judge Harrison has consistently given minorities sentences 3 to 4 times longer than those given to white defendants for the same crimes. This ends today. Reporters scribbled furiously, phones buzzed with breaking news alerts, and social media exploded with reactions. Justice for Sarah and Investigate Harrison began trending. In his chambers, Judge Harrison watched the press conference, his face growing paler with each word. "I am calling for an immediate review of all cases presided over by Judge Harrison," James announced. "I am formally requesting that the State Judicial Review Board investigate his fitness to serve on the bench." James then spoke directly to the camera, his voice softening. "To our children watching at home, Michael, Lisa, and James, I'm sorry we had to hide our family for so long, but I'm not sorry for standing up for what's right. Your mother will come home." The questions came fast and furious. Reporters shouted over one another, cameras clicked, and the room buzzed with energy. James answered each question calmly, revealing more about their life together, Sarah's case, and the investigation into Harrison's past. Across the city, people watched their mayor transform from a political figure into a husband fighting for his wife. The truth was out, and like a stone thrown into still water, its ripples would reach far beyond one family, one judge, or one city. The fight for justice was just beginning. The next morning, veteran reporter Maria Sant sat at her desk at the Daily Chronicle, surrounded by old newspapers and dusty files. Her editor had given her one mission: dig deep into Judge William Harrison's past. "You won't believe what I just found," her young assistant Kevin said, rushing to her desk with a stack of yellowed papers. Their membership records from an exclusive country club in the 1990s. Harrison's name is listed not just as a member but as board chairman during a time when the club openly refused membership to minorities. Maria adjusted her glasses and began typing on her computer. The story was coming together piece by piece, like a dark puzzle. Her phone buzzed with tips from people who had encountered Harrison over the years. A retired courthouse clerk called, sharing stories of Harrison making racist jokes in his chambers during his early days as a judge. "No one said anything," the clerk whispered, still fearful after all these years. "He had too much power." By midday, Maria's office wall resembled a detective's investigation board, filled with photos, newspaper clippings, and sticky notes connecting Harrison's past. The pattern was undeniable, the connections clear. Maria traced the activities on her screen with a red string, each discovery adding another piece to the puzzle. Kevin pointed to the computer. "Look at this," he said. He had found a yearbook photo of a young Harrison from his college days, proudly posing with a fraternity infamous for its racist policies. The caption under the photo read, "Keeping Traditions Alive." Maria's breakthrough came in the form of an anonymous email. Inside, she found scanned copies of letters Harrison had written in the 1980s. In one letter, he argued against integrating local schools. In another, he supported policies to maintain the racial purity of certain neighborhoods. "Print these," Maria instructed Kevin, her hands trembling slightly, "and get Harrison's office on the phone. They need to know what's coming." Meanwhile, Harrison sat in his chambers, watching his career unravel. His phone hadn't stopped ringing since Mayor Mitchell's press conference. Now reporters were digging into his past, unearthing secrets he had worked hard to bury. "Sir, the Daily Chronicle is calling," his secretary announced. "They have some questions about your involvement with the Pine Valley Country Club in 1992. Harrison's face turned pale. He recalled those board meetings, the votes to keep certain people out, the careful wording they used to conceal their true intentions. He never imagined those records would resurface. Back at the Chronicle, Maria received more documents from other journalists now joining the investigation. A reporter from Chicago found cases where Harrison had defended discriminatory practices as a lawyer. Another from Atlanta uncovered his connections to groups known for promoting racial segregation. Kevin burst in with social media printouts. People were starting to share their personal experiences with Harrison. One black law student recalled how Harrison assumed she was a defendant instead of a legal intern, while a Hispanic attorney remembered Harrison mocking his accent during a trial. "We're ready to publish," Maria said to her editor, laying out the evidence. "This goes beyond Sarah Thompson. Harrison has been using his power to harm minorities for decades." The editor reviewed the story carefully. It would dominate the front page the next day. The headline, "Judiciary's Dark Past. 3 Decades of Discrimination Uncovered." As the story went to print, Maria glanced out her window at the courthouse across the street. Harrison was likely inside, frantically trying to salvage his reputation, but the truth that had been buried for so long was finally breaking free. Her phone buzzed one last time that day, a message from Sarah Thompson's teenage son, Michael. He had found Maria's number and sent a simple, heartfelt message. "Thank you for telling the truth about the man who took my mom away." Maria wiped away a tear, feeling the weight of the moment. Tomorrow, the city would wake up to the full story of Judge Harrison's past. His carefully constructed image as a respected judge would crumble under the weight of his own prejudice. In her cell, Sarah Thompson slept peacefully, unaware that the next day's paper would change everything. The truth was about to shine like sunlight, disinfecting the decades of hidden darkness in the city's justice system. The next morning, after the Daily Chronicle's explosive story, the streets surrounding the courthouse erupted into a sea of peaceful protesters. People from every corner of the city gathered, holding signs that read "Justice for Sarah" and "No room for racist judges." Reverend Marcus Johnson, a respected community leader, stood on the courthouse steps addressing the growing crowd. At 65, he had witnessed many protests, but this one felt different. People from all races and backgrounds stood side by side. "Today, we are united by something stronger than race or wealth," he said, his voice booming through a megaphone. "We are united by our demand for justice." Among the protesters, Michael Thompson, Sarah's 14-year-old son, stood with his siblings and their grandmother, holding a sign with a family photo and the words, "We need our mom home." News cameras focused on the children, their faces becoming powerful symbols of the injustice. Lisa Chin, a local restaurant owner, had closed her business for the day to join the protest. She passed out water and sandwiches to protesters, remembering how Sarah used to visit her diner every morning for coffee. "She always had a kind word for everyone," Lisa told a reporter. "Now, it's our turn to stand up for her." Inside City Hall, Mayor James Mitchell watched the gathering crowd from his window. His phone buzzed with messages of support from mayors across the country, and even the governor had called to express concern. "Sir," his assistant interrupted, "Reverend Johnson and some community leaders are here with a proposal." The meeting room quickly filled with religious leaders, civil rights activists, and business owners, all presenting a united front, a citywide boycott of the judicial system until Harrison was removed and Sarah's case was reviewed. "We'll postpone all non-emergency cases," Attorney Mark Wilson said. "Every lawyer who believes in justice will stand with us." At the county jail, Sarah watched the protests on TV in the common room. Other inmates gathered around her, offering support. Even the guards seemed different today, quietly expressing their hope for justice. Outside, the protest had grown to the thousands. Students from local colleges joined in, bringing fresh energy. Signs and chants filled the air. Justice for Sarah! And injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. By evening, the protest had transformed into a candlelight vigil. Thousands of lights flickered in the growing darkness, each flame representing hope for change. Rabbi David Stern, Imam Ahmad Hassan, and Reverend Johnson stood together, sending a powerful message of unity. When Judge Harrison saw the news coverage, he watched in horror, his hands shaking as he poured another drink. His phone rang constantly, reporters, angry citizens, and even old friends distancing themselves from him. His carefully constructed world of prejudice was crumbling. Mayor Mitchell, now walking among the protesters, thanked them for their support. When he reached his children, he hugged them tightly, whispering, "Mom would be so proud of you all." As night fell, most protesters went home, but a dedicated group remained, promising to return every day until justice was served. They set up a rotation schedule to ensure the courthouse steps would never be empty. The last image on the evening news showed Michael placing a protest sign at the courthouse steps, next to a framed photo of his family's last Christmas together. The message was clear. This wasn't just about a legal case. It was about family, community, and the soul of the city. The day ended, but everyone knew this was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring more supporters, more voices, and more determination to right this terrible wrong. The following morning, inside the State Appeals Court building, every seat in Courtroom 3 was filled. Civil rights attorney Benjamin Carter, known as the Justice Warrior, was preparing to present Sarah's appeal. His reputation for fighting injustice had earned him that nickname, and today he was fighting for free. "Your Honors," Carter began, his deep voice resonating throughout the courtroom, "what happened in Judge Harrison's courtroom wasn't just a mistake, it was a crime against justice itself." The three judges leaned in, listening carefully. Judge Maria Rodriguez, known for her fair rulings, studied the file. Judge Thomas Chen reviewed Harrison's past cases. Judge Robert Wilson, the most senior member, watched Carter with intense focus. In the gallery, Mayor Mitchell sat with his children. Michael, refusing to stay home, had insisted on being there. "Mom needs all of us here," he had said that morning. Rachel Chen, the district attorney, sat nearby, ready to present her findings about Harrison's pattern of discrimination. Carter displayed a large screen showing statistics from Harrison's courtroom. For over 15 years, Harrison sentenced minorities to prison terms averaging 32% longer than white defendants for identical crimes. "This isn't a coincidence," Carter said, his voice firm. The courtroom fell silent as the weight of his words settled over them all. The fight for justice was reaching its final stage. "This is racism in a judge's robe," Carter began, pointing to the overwhelming evidence against Judge Harrison. Former clerks had testified about Harrison's racist remarks behind closed doors, and court records revealed his deep-seated bias. Findings from the Daily Chronicle uncovered decades of discriminatory behavior. During a break, Sarah's mother spoke to reporters outside the courtroom, her voice trembling. "My daughter was carrying my heart medication," she said. "Now, she faces life in prison, and I'm left to raise her children. Where is the justice in that?" Back inside, Carter played security footage from Harrison's courtroom, which showed how he treated defendants differently based on their race. Some he smiled at, others he scowled at. Some cases were rushed through, while others received more attention. Reaching the heart of his argument, Carter focused on Sarah Thompson's case. A loving mother sentenced to life imprisonment for carrying prescription medicine in the wrong bottle. This is injustice. This is revenge against those Judge Harrison has always despised. Rachel Chen from the prosecution presented their investigation, explaining, "We reviewed every case Judge Harrison handled over the past 5 years. The pattern of discrimination is undeniable. He used his position to punish minorities. State Attorney David Miller, representing the defense, acknowledged the concerns, conceding, "While the sentence may seem harsh, we recognize the serious issues with Judge Harrison's behavior." Carter made his closing argument. "Your Honors, this case is about more than Sarah Thompson. It's about restoring trust in our justice system. Every time Judge Harrison allowed prejudice to guide his sentences, he undermined that trust. Today you have the power to fix that." The judges retired to deliberate, and Sarah's family huddled together, praying for a fair outcome. Reporters anxiously took notes, waiting for the decision. Hours later, the judges returned, and Judge Rodriguez addressed the court. "The evidence clearly shows Judge Harrison's discriminatory practices. This is not just troubling, it's a violation of constitutional rights and judicial ethics," she stated. The room fell silent as she continued. "We hereby vacate Sarah Thompson's sentence. We are also initiating a review of all cases overseen by Judge Harrison, with priority given to those currently incarcerated." The courtroom erupted in applause. Michael hugged his father, both overcome with emotion. Rachel Chen smiled, knowing justice had been served. Judge Rodriguez added, "We are referring Judge Harrison to the State Judicial Review Board for immediate suspension and investigation." Outside, supporters cheered and celebrated, and church bells rang across the city. The Daily Chronicle website crashed due to high traffic as readers rushed to learn about the breaking news. As Carter packed his briefcase, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He had won many cases, but this one felt different. It wasn't just about one person's freedom, it was about changing a broken system. Sarah Thompson walked out of prison the next day, under the bright sun, wearing the same navy blue dress she had worn to court weeks earlier. But this time, her eyes were filled with joy. Mayor James Mitchell stood outside with their children, once forced to hide their relationship. Michael rushed to his mother, and the family embraced publicly, showing the world their love. "I love you all so much," Sarah whispered, holding her children tight. She then kissed James publicly for the first time. Across town, Judge Harrison was cleaning out his office, his once proud face now strained with the weight of his fall from power. A group of protesters gathered outside, chanting, "Justice wins, racism fails." Maria Santos, a reporter for the Daily Chronicle, typed the final words of her article. Judge Harrison's resignation leads to a review of 2,000 cases. Her investigation had uncovered 15 years of judicial misconduct. The mayor's office became the center of reform as James and Sarah, now working together openly, launched the Justice Reform Initiative to review cases where bias may have influenced sentences. "Every person deserves fair treatment under the law," Sarah said at the initiative's launch. The state Supreme Court mandated mandatory bias training for all judges, and other cities began examining their judicial systems for similar issues. Sarah returned to her normal life, but things had changed. Customers at the diner applauded her when she returned to work, and her colleagues at the hospital threw her a welcome back party. Michael, their oldest son, started a student group called Youth for Justice at his high school. "My mom taught me that standing up for what's right is worth any price," he said. The Thompson-Mitchell family moved into the mayor's residence, and their first Sunday dinner as a public family was covered by the news, symbolizing justice restored. District Attorney Rachel Chen's office worked overtime to review Harrison's old cases. As they did, wrongful sentences were overturned and families were reunited. The city changed. People, now aware of judicial bias, organized court-watching programs and demanded transparency. Sarah, once hidden, now hosted public gatherings with her family at the lake house. A month after her release, Sarah stood once again on the courthouse steps, this time as a speaker at a justice reform rally. "My story had a happy ending," she said, "but there are many others still waiting for justice." Sarah and James walked home hand in hand, their children running ahead. The city had transformed, and a family once hidden in the shadows now walked proudly in the light. "We did it," Sarah whispered to James. "We really did it." "No," he replied, squeezing her hand. "We're just getting started."